Hey, good evening. We're glad that you're here tonight, and we're gonna get started. Hope you're enjoying some of the warmer weather, getting out of a little bit of the frigid cold. One reminder: we do have these baby bottles over in the back on the table there, and if you haven't grabbed one already, we're filling these out, and you can go ahead and put coins. You can put cash in there, and then we'll have a place to collect them, safely collect them. So just keep an ear out as to when we're actually going to do the final collection. I can't remember what the date was. I know we try to take February and do this, so we should be coming up close to the end of that. But if you have a chance to fill that, that's for the Cecil County Pregnancy Center, and they really try to minister to young women, ladies, anyone that is pregnant and in needing of some support. And that's been a huge deficiency, I think, just among Christians over the decades. We really emphasize, keeping the baby and not aborting the baby, but sometimes there hasn't been enough support on the side to provide the resources that are needed. So if you're able, go ahead and grab one of those if you haven't already. Our kids are already working hard, filling it up. They're finding money all over the place. I leave too much money laying around, probably. I got dollar bills and things just laying around, so if they see it, they confiscate it, and it winds up in there. So we can work on that. So let's have a word of prayer as we get started. Lord, thank you for your kindness to us. We're grateful for an evening to be able to just gather together, to take a few minutes and pause and reflect in the middle of a week, to worship you, to thank you for all that you do. Please help us as we just keep our focus on you, and just that you want to work in our lives. You constantly are working to draw us to yourself, and so help us to see that, to cooperate with that, to know that you are the God of all, and you are the Creator, and you also have come very near to us through Christ, and now we can have that relationship with you. So help us to just understand that, to recognize that, to be changed by that. Bless in our time here tonight and be glorified in it, we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, why don't we start out? Why don't we have a little bit of a testimony time? We're going to start out. I've got the microphone here. If anybody would like to share anything, maybe there's something that God really worked in your heart through the message on Sunday. I got to watch just a little bit of the message from Pastor Josh. He was in Habakkuk, right? Habakkuk, the second part of chapter number 2. Anything stand out to you from the message? Anything encouraging, challenging? Here, I'll let you ask that.
The things that are going on. The things that are going on in this world, and you look at Habakkuk and how he prayed.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't something that we're going through like something similar to that?
Yeah, so as Mrs. Adams kind of lays out, I do think, I think the way we would always try to say it is that Scripture is not to us, but it is for us. So we can always make applications, we can always draw principles, teachings, and sometimes the situations look very, very similar. I'll give you a quick for instance, so I was over at Fairwinds preaching Sunday, giving an update on our ministry and just visiting them. And, the passage was about the Pharisees. Well, I don't know about you, but I don't know a single Pharisee today. I don't know anybody who's a Pharisee. Maybe they are out there. Maybe they've revived the sect, the Pharisees. But I don't know any Pharisees. But they share a lot of similarities to, let's say, the Catholics, a Roman Catholic or an Eastern Orthodox, where there's a lot of religion and there's a lot of morality, but sometimes there isn't the connection with the gospel. And so Jesus is explaining to the Pharisees, you need to make sure that you're going to be a part of this kingdom that's coming, because right now you're on the outside looking in, even though you think you're in. So with that, like Habakkuk, the reality is we live in a really troubled world. America is not Israel, so we always want to make that distinction. We are not this new people of God. The new people of God is the church. But we do learn a lot about how to live in a fallen world, in a very broken world, and how to look for the ways God is working, how to come to God when the broken world just keeps beating against us. So I do think, there's a lot that we can learn, a lot of lessons we can learn from Habakkuk and understanding that. All right, anything else from the sermon Sunday? Encouraging, challenging? How about any opportunities to witness? Anybody have a good open door or good chance to witness to somebody? Share the gospel? No, you take it, Mrs. Adams. We're going to turn this into the Mrs. Adams time.
I was just so happy when I visited Churchman's Village last week, and me being sick for a while, I just wanted to make my visit short, just make a quick visit and drop off some blankets and daily breads and things. So this Jimmy, he's a good Christian from Life Church in Old Baltimore Pike, and he's there I guess he can't walk, and he's something wrong with him. Well, anyway, I already talked to him in the dining room, so I had told him I'm making a very short visit and visit everybody. So I went going down to Carter, and as I was going, and he's coming right following me with a wheelchair. He says, "Anna," I said, "Jimmy, I only got a few minutes with each one." I said, "What is it what did you want?" He said, "I just want a hug," and it makes me feel so good.
Yeah, well, that's a blessing to share that love and encouragement with other folks. All right. How about some ways that God's working in your life or things that you're just thankful for? Maybe want to share something? Mrs. Adams will say something else if you guys don't. She'll do it. Well, we got to open our mouths, right? All right, Chris.
So I'll hop back to number 2 real quick. On Monday, I was in conversation with one of our project managers at work, and we're consistently trying to think of ways when we get to this project rolling, and there's 450 some people on this project from all over the place. How to build community and how to make sure that all those people away from their families and whatnot have somewhere to kind of dig in and not fall into all sorts of different traps. And so that allowed me to open the door to what our community has been so very quickly in this church. And number one, that's been an awesome blessing to us, and I was able to portray that. But also, it's that little bit of an open door to continue to witness to people of that nature and stuff. So that was kind of an exciting little conversation. I mean, it wasn't anything of significant depth, but it was an open door, and he was open to the conversation a little bit. And so it was definitely a happy starting point in my mind. And then secondly, for Kelsey and I both, I think this past week, God has kind of worked through us and through persistence through a lot of difficult things. We've been very busy. Kelsey had a work project that kept her up past midnight almost every night for several weeks, and I had been studying on top of work to pass an exam that I passed last week, and God kind of really pushed us through that, and so the persistence and blessing that has come after those things has been evident in that we really did have to lean on not just ourselves or our ability, but God to kind of get through that, and He, in His faithful way, was faithful.
All right, great. Thank you, Chris. So persistence, that's going to tie a little bit into the proverb we're going to look at tonight. It has a little bit of a slight variation to it, but that idea of slow and steady wins the race, and persistence and working towards goals. Good. Any final ways you see God's working, encouraging things in your life? All right, Mom.
I'm just thankful getting through all the sicknesses. Between John and myself, we've had it for about a month. First I had it, then I gave it to him, and he had it, and he's, I know Tim, your kids and everybody at your house has had it, but, it just kind of hangs on for a while. But Lord brought us through, and we're both healthy now and doing well.
Yeah, we can all say amen to that, right? It felt like January was pretty brutal, right? I remember when my brother, he used to have like this little, it wasn't like a meme, I don't know, he would always say it, but man, January, it's been a rough year. Like, it feels like it's a whole year. January is so long, and it's cold, and it's a lot of sickness going around. It's been really, really brutal. Any final things before we move on? Don't want to take away more opportunities if you want to share. All right, so we're going to give an update. We ran out of new updates from other missionaries, so we're going to update us. So here we are, the Valientes and the ministry in the Philippines. So we'll share a little bit. Well, I think you guys have seen our new updated prayer card. We should have some out in the lobby. If you don't have one of those already, feel free to grab those. And then on the back, it has all of our details as far as our ministry website and all those different resources if you ever need to get in touch with us. So let me share our latest update, which was middle of January 2025. And first off, we had noted that we booked our tickets and that graduation for Haven of Grace Seminary is coming. So that's going to be our first Haven of Grace Seminary graduation, and that's set for Saturday, May 10th. And I, along with my son Jonas, will be flying out to take part in this joyous occasion. On the trip, we're going to be traveling out to Oregon to visit a supporting church, which we haven't been out to for probably 5 or 6 years now. And then we'll be visiting my sister and her family in Northern California. So my brother-in-law, Andy, he works at a camp, Wolf Mountain, I think it's called, right? Wolf Mountain Camp, Christian camp out there. And then we're going to be flying out from San Francisco, and we'll be traveling to the Philippines. So this is just our travel out to the Philippines. We're going to leave from Philadelphia, fly into Portland, drive down to Eugene, Oregon, where we're going to visit Westside Baptist Church. And then we're going to drive down to Grass Valley, California, which is probably about a 7-hour drive. And then another 3-hour drive to San Francisco, fly out to Taipei, and we're going to land after that, travel to Cebu in the Philippines, and then to Bacolod, and then drive down to Haven of Grace. So that's going to be quite a trip. And by the way, if anybody is interested in helping drop us off or pick us up, we still need someone to either, well, the dropping off isn't too bad because that's Philadelphia. The picking up is a lot more involved because that's going to be up at JFK, up at the airport. So just letting you know, if anybody's interested, please come and see me. We'll mark you down. And I can't remember we're coming back on May 12th. I can't remember the exact time frame. I think it might be at night. So if you would, just pray for a couple of requests that we have for that. First off, that the graduation will be a special time of rehearsing God's faithfulness and His goodness, that the graduation candidates will be able to finish all their assignments. They're doing good. We have a couple students I'm worried about whether they'll get done. We have 7 that can graduate. That's our number. And we've got 1 or 2 that they're going to have to really work to finish up. And then just pray that it'll be a really good trip for Jonas, Jonas is 10, and me. He'll be turning 11 coming up in May. And I'm just praying that God will really do a good, deep work in Jonas's heart and life, and that this will be a good avenue just to be able to spend time with him. Spring classes began, so you can see the class there, Romans. And as you know, that's Pastor June, and those of you that were here, he was with us on February 2nd, right? You guys remember Pastor June? And at this point, when I had written this update, he had yet to come. Obviously, now we get to look back. But I mentioned that while he was here, he was going to be spending time preaching in 3 different churches, attending a national pastors conference in Florida. And then I encouraged everyone to pray for them since they're going to be here during the coldest part of the year, which they were. Although they did miss like the most brutal cold up here. It was like, 9 degrees or 8 degrees or 4 degrees at one point, and the week after it got down to like 15 to 20. So it was a little bit better, but they were freezing the whole time. And then just miscellaneous happenings. I mentioned that on December 21st, I had the privilege of officiating a wedding of Kyle and Hannah Stump. Hannah had grown up in our church in Millville, PA, and I really enjoyed the time with them doing premarital counseling and getting to officiate their wedding. Weddings are a lot of fun, but they're very stressful. Like, by far, there's nothing that compares to trying to do a wedding. Funerals are a piece of cake. Weddings, there's so much stress. I'd do 50 funerals over doing one wedding, to be honest with you. And I probably have done. I've probably done 50 to 1. I've done like maybe 8 weddings, 7 or 8 weddings or something, but we've done a lot of funerals. So that's just how it goes. That's how it is. But then I mentioned that we had a Christmas Eve candlelight service. We were grateful for that. So just the various prayer requests, just praying for a great spring semester, for the upcoming seminary graduation, and then for a great trip to the Philippines. Also just pray, I'll mention it here, this year we really do need to raise a little bit more support for our family, but also for the seminary. So I'm going to be trying to raise some extra funds. The seminary needs about $1,000 a month, and we're at about $650 of what's been committed, what people are giving. So we're trying to raise another $350 a month. So if you pray for that, our family, we'd like to probably raise a little bit more as well. So those are 2 requests. We're going to try, whether it's through churches, through individuals, we're praying about open doors to partner with people on that front. And then as far as praises, Liddy had up to that point only 1 seizure the last 2.5 months. She did have a seizure, I think in February, and then 1 a week and a half before that. So she's had 2 since the writing of this. They have started her on some new medication, so we're praying that will be effective for her. She said she feels pretty good on it, so we'll see. And then praise to God for the upcoming graduation. All right. Well, that's the Valientes. I don't feel right praying for myself. Anybody want to pray for our family and ministry? All right, Josh. Thank you.
Let's pray. Father, thank you so much for Tim and his family and their great ministry here, both, just to help our church grow and sustain, but also all the work and the seeds that they've planted in the Philippines and the continued work that he does there teaching. I just want to pray for specifically their upcoming trip, him and Jonas, and that the graduation would be good, but ultimately that it would just be a demonstration of what you've done in those men's lives, and that you would just be glorified through it, that you would inspire others to follow their path, and also just equip them for the ministry, that they actually use that and go forward and start teaching and preaching in their own country. That's ultimately what you called us to do, and we're so thankful that this is just an amazing example of the Great Commission that we can do and participate in through our giving. I want to pray for the Valiente family, for all of them that support Tim and Sarah as they continue to minister. And it just takes the family, it takes the church, it takes their support to make that all happen. And we just want to continue to ask for your blessing on that ministry, for your blessing on the message tonight. And we ask all this in your Son, Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Josh. All right, so if you would, let's go ahead. Let's go to Proverbs. And I think this is going to be a really good study tonight. I think it's going to be an encouraging look into Proverbs chapter 13. And we were in verse number 12. We now have just bumped up 1 verse here. And we're going to look at verse number 11. All right, so Proverbs 13, verse number 11. Wealth gotten by vanity shall be diminished. But he that gathereth by labor, literally by his own hand, shall increase. So again, as we often find in Proverbs, we have a proverb that deals with wealth. However, instead of just focusing on the rich and the poor or some other topic or theme, this proverb focuses more on how that wealth is acquired. So how you get this wealth, how you gather this wealth. And the key concept in the first line is this wealth being acquired by vanity. So if you look at this, so Proverbs 13:11, wealth gotten by vanity. Now, this is the very basic Hebrew word, which you see all throughout Ecclesiastes. You see that? I'm scrolling down, and it's in Ecclesiastes. Let's see how many times. It's this spike here, 37 times. So that's the vanity of vanity, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. So that's like, what's that, 3 times right there, 4 times right there, 5 times? So it shows up 37 times in Ecclesiastes, and then, you know, it appears sporadically throughout the rest of the Old Testament. And you notice how this word is translated. So chabel is the Hebrew word, and it's translated as vanity or vanities. It's also translated as breath, which would be akin to the word empty or nothing or vapor, you know, something that's very light. Your breath, you know, it comes out and then it just kind of disappears. So there's nothing really to it. I mean, you can tell it's coming out. You can, you know, feel it maybe on your hand, but it's just kind of empty. There's not a lot to it. It's also translated as idols in a number of places, translated as worthless, false, and interestingly, it's translated one time here, gained hastily. Now, this is the ESV translation of the verse, and this is that usage as they translated gained hastily. So wealth gained hastily will dwindle. Now, this is one of the places I would probably have preferred the translators to keep the base word of vanity, because what happened here in this translation, they have kind of inserted their interpretation. Now, I say that, you know, I like the ESV well enough. There's places I think it doesn't handle the text correctly, but I could say that about the King James too. There's places I don't think it handles the text correctly. So it kind of is what it is. Every translation has some high spots, some low spots. To me, this is one of those low spots, you know, where I think what they're doing is they're saying we think the idea of vanity in this text is the idea of gaining it, you know, hastily, quickly, wealth acquired quickly will dwindle, but whoever gathers little by little will increase it. So that's just me. I would probably have preferred it translated the more natural way, which is with the word vanity. So dishonest money, which is another interpretation. And they may be right. ESV might be right, NIV might be right. But my preference is translate it as consistently as you can with how the word is understood, and then let the English reader then make the place, you know, bring that to a point of interpretation. So let the reader wrestle with, okay, so what does that vanity mean? Because that's a question, isn't it? Like, here's the question. Why or what does it mean for wealth to be acquired by vanity? What do you guys think that means? What is vanity in that context? Wealth acquired by vanity. Wealth gotten by vanity shall be diminished.
I mean, I'm thinking of the word kind of like windfall, you know, like you inherit something, or, you know, you get lucky or a stock goes up and all of a sudden, you know, you've got all this money to burn, and as opposed to something that is repeatable and consistent that you know you can generate from your labor.
Okay, so that would fall into the translation of wealth gotten quickly, right? Hastily. Okay, other thoughts? I think that's valid. I think that's a good perspective. Okay. Yeah, and I think that's where when you just translate it as, you know, wealth gotten hastily, you're kind of missing a bit of the broader idea that it's not just that you got the money quickly, but you got it maybe through deceitful means. So deception.
My ESV translation has
A little
one,
Uh-huh.
and it's the alternative meaning there is by fraud.
Okay. Yeah. So giving maybe a fuller idea, you know, possibly by fraud. Anything else? Okay. Now, let's ask that question. How can someone acquire wealth by vanity? So I think Josh mentioned a couple. You get a windfall. Maybe you're not expecting. Cryptocurrency shoots up. You know, you put some money in cryptocurrency and it just goes crazy.
Play the lottery. I know people who will put like dollar, and I'm just putting in $1 a week. $1 a week piles up.
Yeah.
And even the people who do win the lottery, I mean, they've had that TV show on TLC before that has people who won the lottery, and a lot of them, their money's gone already.
Yeah. It's amazing how many people win the lottery and go bankrupt. Like the percentage is ridiculously high. You know, people that win millions and millions and millions of dollars that, like, you know, you give me $500,000, I'm set for life, honestly. That's all I need. But, you know, these people are winning tens of millions of dollars and they lose it. And a lot of times is because once people find out that you've won that money, then everybody comes out of the woodwork. You know, they're ready to.
I want that money. If
Right.
someone was to give it to you, I wouldn't want it.
Well, I just wouldn't ask any questions.
Oh, no, I wouldn't want it.
That's right, Mrs. Adams.
Oh, I forgot what the scripture says, but they won't accept it. It's not right. So that's wrong for us. That's vanity.
Right. That's the idea of vanity.
But I see a lot of Christians, they do play the lottery, and I just feel like, no. And even I have some people that are Christian, well, there are Christians too, that are kind of go to the food bank. And they want to give me some of that. I said, give it to somebody that needs it. I feel guilty taking it.
Yeah.
Even getting food from the food bank.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that'll fit into what we'll talk about in the second part of the proverb, which is, you know, gathering little by little, right? It's not this big windfall. It's not all at once. It's understanding that it's going to take time, and we build wealth over time, over the long haul.
But if you have a windfall of money and you give it away, like there was these two rich guys, and one guy said, money can't make you happy, and the other guy said, yes it is. Yes it can if you give it away. But you know what I mean? So that way you're not winning the lottery or anything, but
Yeah.
you got it by like crypto coin or whatever.
Yeah. And that, even that, you know, you come back to that, you know, money can't make you happy. And some of us are like, well, let me try. Like, let's see how it works. But yeah, no, you're right. And it's not that it's not sinful, you know, if there is a windfall. You know, like if you get an inheritance, or if, you know, a cryptocurrency goes through the roof, you know, that's not sinful. But you also want to know, okay, well, how can I invest that in things that will last, things that are important? So we've talked about it with money before, the importance of providing for our family. Okay, so that's of prime importance. And then looking around and seeing ways that we can invest in ministry and invest with others. Yeah.
I think if you look at this verse as a whole, when you work and you labor and you get the money, I think you're more careful with that money because you know how hard it was to get. If somebody just gives it to you, you kind of like,
Yeah.
it doesn't mean as much.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Things that you don't work for and are just handed to you, you do not appreciate. I mean, children are the best example of that. If they work for something, like they have a toy or something, or they're investing their money in, they're going to actually have to pay for it. They actually take care of that. They appreciate that. They're careful with it. You just hand it to them, and it's like, yeah, okay, great, and then just throw it on in the corner. So that's an important principle as well, that you start to appreciate things that you have to actually work for. All right, other thoughts on that? So what are some of the ways that people acquire wealth by vanity? I think we've talked about deception. You can get it by fraud. You can get it by oppressing people, right? Extorting people. I think drug dealer is a good example of that. Just there's a lot of ways you can make a quick buck, but it would be biblically acquiring it by vanity. Now, again, the second line, I think, helps inform the meaning of this word vanity. So that's why I would really not prefer to translate that as, acquired hastily. I don't think that's really communicating, because if you notice the second line, the point of the second line is that someone is gathering by labor, and we'll see this word in just a second, but this is the Hebrew word hand. It's a super common word. It's just like whenever, it uses the word hand, it's that Hebrew word, yad. So it's basically saying that someone who is acquiring wealth through the work of their own hands, they're providing for themselves, they are going to increase. So someone that gathers by a fair day of work, they are going to increase. So their money, yeah.
Labor, and they don't make a whole lot of money.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem like they really increase in.
Yeah, and that's why it's a proverb rather than a promise. It's not like every person that works hard is going to come out on the end wealthy, right? That's just the way of life. There are plenty of times when people work hard, and especially in certain cultures where it's kind of a diminishing return, where you're not really getting back the effort that you're putting forth. That is true. Now, in contrast to the person who acquires wealth by vanity, again, that could be deceit, right? You're being deceptive in how you're getting this wealth, or illegitimate means. Again, think of like a drug dealer. I mean, he may be driving that Beamer or Mercedes, but the reality is the way he's acquired that wealth is not through honest means. It's vanity. It is empty. Or simply without working for it. Again, there's a lot of people that are raised in such a way that they don't have to work for anything, and everything is just handed to them. That's pretty dangerous to raise a child and just give them everything that they need. Now, I'm not saying keep them impoverished and don't feed them and don't do good things for them, but there is a point where your children should learn how to work for things and be able to deprive themselves of, I want to do this, but I know I've got to do this, so I'm willing to do that because I know what the end result's going to be. So we want to make sure that we don't fall into any of those categories, whether it's deception, some illegitimate means, or just by not working. So the proverb teaches that the one who gathers by labor will increase. And so labor and vanity, in these verses, they are parallel. And as I mentioned, the word translated labor comes from the Hebrew word for hand. And like I said, I think especially for young people, this is a hard lesson to really learn, because you start out in life and you're looking back and you look at your parents. And your parents, they've got a house, they've got furniture, they've got probably decent cars, and you immediately in your thinking is like, well, my parents have all that. I need to have all that. I need to have this house. I need to have, nice cars. Got to have everything furnished, all this. Well, you don't stop to really think that it took your parents 35 years to get to that place, right? I mean, they have put in the work, and so what happens is a lot of times, especially young couples, they start out and they just get into massive amounts of debt, just like huge amounts of debt, because they're going to charge everything to kind of get themselves up to speed of where they think they should be or where they need to be. And that's a very dangerous position to be in. We need to recognize that labor over the long haul is what God blesses. So getting up every morning, going to work, earning that paycheck, putting money down, paying for your house. We're in a position, I'm finally at the state where I can actually see the end of our mortgage payments. Like, it's still a ways away. We still got like 7 years. But I remember starting out and thinking, I'm never going to pay this off. And thinking, like, I wonder what it's going to feel like when I don't have a mortgage to pay for. It feels good, Mike. All right, there. I got a firsthand witness, eyewitness account. Because to me, that's just like, because you pay every single month, and it goes down little by little, incrementally, and you're like, man. And then you're thinking, you start tabulating, and it's like, man, yeah, it's going to take me another however many years to pay this off. But the encouraging thing is, little by little, that wins the day. I mean, we've never gotten some massive windfall where we could just be like, okay, let's just pay off that mortgage. Let's buy a new car. Let's do this. Let's do that. It has always been just a very, very little each and every point along the way, trying not to get ahead of yourself and make sure you know what you can spend, what you need to spend. But it really is, it speaks to the fact that it's little by little. It's not this big, you don't lurch forward, these leaps and bounds. It's one small step at a time. And what are your thoughts on that? What do you think is important for us as Christians to make sure we have in our mind so that we don't lose sight of how God will bless, but it takes time, that we have to be patient?
Teach your children to save.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so teach.
So they'll know when they're older the value of each little piece they put in that bank.
Mm-hmm.
They can do that same thing if they put $100 or $1,000.
Yep. So teach your children to save.
Save yourself.
Do it for yourself. Try to put some money away. Use that for. Mm-hmm.
Give money to God. That's a lesson they need to learn.
Yeah. So I think that ties into the proverb, honor the Lord with your substance, the first fruits of all your increase.
My grandmother used to say, you worry about the pennies, the dollars will take care of themselves.
There you go. So penny pinching, right? Although there aren't going to be any pennies left to pinch, right? I think President Donald Trump is ready to get rid of the penny. Costs 2 cents to make a cent, right? So they're not making money on that. Yeah. So if you say it again. So if you watch the pennies, the dollars will take care of themselves. Yeah, I think that's a good principle.
I think there's kind of like a tone about purpose and intentionality in this, that, if you do something hastily, you didn't really have a plan, you just kind of went after it. And things that occur in vain occur with no point at the end of it. But if you have intention and you have purpose, that labor of thinking about what you're doing even pays dividends as well. So
there's some intentionality. Yeah, the reality that you have to make the plan, you have to stick with the plan, and it's the long game, right? It's not like the immediate. You have to think, okay, the long game, where am I going to wind up if we stick with this plan?
I kind of wanted to build off of that, like the vanity A lot of times when people seek stuff out by vanity, it usually ends in disaster, and then they got to start over again. When you labor, when somebody's a brick mason, when somebody's a plumber, and they work with their hands, they're also gaining experience, and they also have a reputation that they're taking with them. And that carries on through your life. When you have a good reputation, that helps you with your labor.
Yeah, I think that's a good point as well, that things are hard to start with. Things are hard at the get-go, but they do get easier. So like if you're starting out as a plumber, well, no one knows you, no one knows your work. So it's going to take time to build a reputation. It's going to take time to build the customer base so that you can, get enough jobs and feed yourself. But over time, hopefully, if you're working hard, working with your hands, you're growing in that skill, you're able to then build that base, and then you have further opportunities so you can help build that. And I think it all comes back to when you start out, things are hard. And I remember, and just thinking like looking back, and we've talked about this before, the difference of where we're at now and when we started out, if that water heater, it's not a hot water heater, it's a water heater. I always get that confused. But if that water heater goes, that's like just a national emergency. Like, I don't know what we're going to do, how we're going to pay for that. Starting out, it's like you really are, things are really tight. But, over time, over the decades, hopefully you're now building, amassing some wealth. And, a water heater, it's a frustration, it's an annoyance, and it's a hit to the budget, but it's not like going to derail you. And that's kind of the point. You start out with very little, but slowly you're acquiring that wealth. And I think, there's plenty of, financial gurus. Obviously, Dave Ramsey is probably one that's well known. And that, I think there's value in some of it. I don't take his extreme view on credit cards. We got a 2% credit card I love. That's what pays for, date days for Sarah and me. We live off of that. Like, we try to go out. We've been trying to do it about once a week. It had been like, once every couple months, but now we're trying to do like about once a week. And I don't think I could afford it without points. So, sorry, Dave Ramsey, I can't buy into the don't ever use a credit card. But the idea of, spending within your means, it doesn't matter if you're spending above what you're taking in. That's not sustainable, right? You cannot sustain on that. So spending within your means, but also making plans. Okay, we're going to work on paying off this debt. Start with the smallest, work your way up, the snowball, all that good stuff. So there is a lot of value, and I think it's following principles of Proverbs, this idea of it's, slow and steady wins the race. It's not, always looking, around the corner for this, big windfall or hitting the lottery or, I got this scheme in my mind. It's just I'm going to keep plodding away and keep focused to get that done. All right, let's see. So there's that word for hand, as I mentioned earlier. So the idea there is someone that gathers by labor, that is by their hand. So in that picture, as Randall is saying, you're working. In this context, you're working with your hand to receive that. All right, what final thoughts do you have on that? Comments on, let me go back to the verse so you can at least see that. Any lessons learned or things to share?
I think that it's pretty, it's difficult to live by biblical financial principles in a bad economy like we're in. If you're not already past that, if you're struggling through stuff, it can be really difficult because a lot of the media that you see, everything around you is trying to glorify that kind of, look at all the money that this, whatever person made, and especially, if you look at so-called influencers or whatever people are doing, it seems like they're getting a lot of money for a very little amount of work, or maybe no work at all. They're just kind of, producing content, which I guess is a job, in and of itself, but it's kind of like
to a person, you know, who's grinding.
Seems like vanity.
Seems like vanity, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that it's a big challenge, right, to think like that and to live like that when, you know, kind of everything in the culture is trying to make you believe that it's possible to get a lot by vanity.
Yeah. And like what you're saying as far as, I think there is a struggle. I mean, especially in where we live in this part of the country, but also just where we are as a country. And it is hard. I'm thinking about, you know, Micah, for instance. He's 18, and at one point he was talking about, you know, thinking about moving out at some point. I'm like, that would honestly be the dumbest thing you could possibly do. You have a roof over your head, and you wind up, you know, let's say he moves out when he's 20, even if he has a halfway decent job, you're going to spend pretty much all of your money on that house, rent, and rent is crazy right now. Housing is crazy. So, but I did read a thing, it was on Facebook, that, you know, they were trying to make the case that it's not the millennial or what's the next generation, Gen Z. You know, we kind of like, well, they don't work, they don't know how to handle money. But, you know, they said, so this was on Facebook. My parents bought a house back in, whatever, 70-something, 60-something for this amount of money. And equivalent today, you know, that money today would be $246,000. And they said, my parents' house just appraised for $2.2 million. So, I mean, that's a little bit more than just like, we'll just find a job, kid, and put money down. There's more going on. You know, the way housing is, it makes it really, really hard. How sustainable that's going to be for the future, who knows? But that is something to take into account, and to try not, especially for that younger generation, not to be discouraged, realizing that it's going to take time. Maybe it's going to take a little bit longer because of what housing is doing right now. But it is good to invest. So, like for us, you know, we always felt that housing was going to be a good investment. I remember talking to an old man, had been a part of this church. He's passed away now 15 years ago. And he was telling me, he said, you know what? I've never lost money on real estate. That was his counsel. And I can say, you know, from my own perspective, I've lost thousands of dollars, you know, at different points. But I've made tens of thousands and ultimately will be hundreds of thousands off of real estate. Now, that's not realized yet. That's going to take a while. But over time, you know, so yes, there is a reality that, especially for that younger generation, we're going to have to really try to help them to think through what is sustainable, you know, because when they get out there, you start with very, very little. And if you're not making a six-figure salary, even if you are, you know, it's funny to see people complaining like, we make $250,000 a year and it's not sustainable. I'm thinking like, man, if you're making $250,000 and that's not sustainable, you can't make it, that's a serious problem. Now, they need to go see Dave Ramsey. That's what they need to do. But
even though you make a plan and there's always something that, like 2 weeks ago, my wife was doing the wash and the wash machine was going and
yeah,
and it's full of water naturally, full of clothes.
yeah,
You know what I mean? And it breaks. So, you know, we didn't count on that, but it's like, oh man.
yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's true. There's always the unforeseen, and that's why I keep mentioning Dave Ramsey. But his philosophy is you build up that $1,000 emergency fund. That's the first thing you put money towards, and then start tackling other debt. And hopefully over time you can also build that up, you know, as well. Try to build up so that even larger things that may go, like an HVAC system, which it's not going to be $1,000. That's going to be, you know, thousands of dollars. You're still able to handle that. Putting the money away?
I go into Home Depot, it's like, ooh, I don't have that.
Yep.
I need one of
I
those.
use
The
it better
temptation.
than on the saver.
Yeah.
I'm the one putting pennies away.
So you just need to keep following around whenever you go shopping.
Yeah.
Well, I leave the credit card at home now, I don't even.
There you go.
Wow.
Well, it's the same thing. Is it a Dave Ramsey thing? You put it in ice, you freeze it. Has anyone ever? You freeze your credit card in ice, and you put it in water and then you freeze it so that if you're gonna use it, you gotta work at it so it makes you at least stop and think. Again, I don't follow that advice either. But with that being said, yeah, I think there's a lot we can learn. Final comments, thoughts. All right. Again, wealth gotten by vanity shall be diminished, but he that gathereth by labor, by his own hand, by working steadily shall increase. All right, let's take our time. We're going to spend some time in prayer here. Some prayer requests. Obviously, we're going to continue praying for Carol Ditzler. Just pray for her health and for grace. A couple other requests. Let me see here. I know I've got some updates here on a couple people. No, wait. Let me get to the right. Okay. So, Wanda Wilson is in the hospital, or was taken to the hospital. She was at Christiana. She was having some breathing issues. She's one of our shut-ins. And then Keith Lewis had a stroke last night, and his wife Judy had called to let us know. So if you would, let's be praying for Keith Lewis, and then also we're going to pray for Wanda Wilson. Continue to pray also for the Durhams, and specifically Diana with some health needs as well. Praying for Chris Perez, continue to pray for that, for a job situation, and just for open doors there. All right. Right. Becky is not in the hospital at present. All right. Okay, let's go ahead and we'll split up for prayer then.